No patient information. For administrative use only. Complete all items. Patient number C2803. Intake date January 11th, 1918. 10:30 to noon. Patient name Roger Vane Worthington Carlyle. Sex male. Referral Erica Carlyle. Medical history. Erica Carlyle, in her own sessions, has referred repeatedly to her brother having issues with nightmares his entire life. She's been very receptive to therapy, and I encouraged her to send her brother in for consultation. Parents Theodore Gimble Carlyle, deceased, and Vanessa Crosby Carlyle. Mother suffered nervous collapse, diagnosed as incompetent. Under treatment at the Butler River Sanitarium, Connecticut. Father died 8 months later, automobile accident. Likely a result of excessive alcohol consumption. Roger thrust into position of wealth and power at 22 years of age, unable to cope, playboy. Youthful philandering, often documented by press. Sister asserted Roger had nightmares since childhood. Patient appears vivacious and healthy. Like sister, quite attractive, and a more pleasant conversationalist. Easy to see why he's regarded as a very eligible bachelor. Test scores. Intake questionnaire. PSIQ 3.70. Indication unbalanced. General threat level 6.2. Danger to self L. Others M. Recommendations fresh air, dream journal. Complications insecurity. Reference case AO spare. Dream subject distant voice calling C's name. Struggles to find source Egyptian. Therapy notes has potential. TAMIP ink block test rebuttals. Successful 0, failed 7. Spectrum color count BL6, RD8, YEL5, GR11, BK12. Spectrum indication, possible perceptual disorder, phobias. Placement recommendation, outpatient. After repeated goading by his sister, Mr. Roger Vane Worthington Carlyle visited me this morning. In preliminary conversation, he deprecated the importance of his state of mind, or even that he might be experiencing any type of psychological symptoms. Upon being questioned about his nightmares, patient conceded that he does have some trouble sleeping, and often experiences a recurring dream. Carlyle was able to access memory of the dream readily. Dream usually features a distant voice calling his name. The voice uses Carlyle's second given name, Vane, by which the patient admits he always thinks of himself. Follow up on this. Vanity? Weather vane? Carlyle moves toward the voice and has to struggle through a web-like mist from where the caller seems to be calling. Caller finally sees the caller, a male, tall, dark, and gaunt. There's a symbol on the caller's forehead, an inverted Egyptian ankh. The caller extends his right hand towards Carlyle. On the left palm is Carlyle's own face. On the right, Carlyle sees a strange misshapen pyramid. Carlyle claims to have no particular interest in things Egyptian, at least not consciously. Caller brings his hands together, and Carlyle feels himself float away from the ground into flight. He stops before an assemblage of monstrous figures. Many are human with animal limbs. Many feature fangs and talons, and some have no particular shape at all. All of them are circled around a pulsating ball of yellow energy, which Carlyle recognizes as another aspect of the collar. The ball draws him in. As he becomes part of it, he sees through eyes which are not his own. A great triangle appears in the void, its twisted symmetry of the same fashion is the vision of the pyramid on the collar's palm. Carlyle says, "And become with me a god," or words to that effect. As millions of odd forms rush into the triangle, Carlyle wakes. Carlyle defensive about dream, insistent that it's not a nightmare, though admitting that it does upset his sleep. Carlyle describes sensation that dream as some kind of genuine calling, and he claims to revel in having been so chosen. It's my strong opinion that he is conflicted or undecided about calling. One could see indecisiveness as a prevalent life theme. Impressions. Nothing especially interesting at work here. Dream caller is clearly a manifestation of his own father tugging at his unconscious mind, an invitation for him to seize his destiny as the heir of the family's fortune. Inverted ankh, clearly a phallic symbol of manhood and sexual authority, likewise with pyramid motifs. Source of Egyptian iconography unclear. Patient has desire to achieve personal, professional, and sexual potency through ascension into god status. Going forward works through determination of nightmare status of dreams versus recurrent themes. Also probe for indicators of underlying emotional trauma. Delve into paternal relationship, undue domination of deceased authority figure. Explore patient's mother-sister relationships. Possible that his mother's breakdown formed an emotional trauma. If he takes on mantle of godhood, that should allow him to embrace his role as heir to family business and as head of the Carlyle family. Prescription. Gave patient encouragement regarding recollection of dreams. Recommended daily use of dream journal upon waking to document all specific recollections from dreams. Set weekly appointment regimen to begin formal process of assessing subconscious manifestations. Session report. Patient name Carlyle Roger Vane. Session date 1/18/18. Patient seemed eager for a new session and eager to communicate dream imagery. Said process of journaling sessions improved his recollection of specific dream imagery. Described dream again from first session. Called through misty webs by dark Egyptian man with phallic symbol prominently on head. The Egyptian figure led him to a glowing yellow light, which gave him a godlike view of the earth. Claimed dream left him feeling fulfilled, warm, sense of purpose. Patient described a dream from later in the week. He was called through mist by Egyptian figure, who showed him hands marked with pyramids design and patient's face. After they joined hands, the Egyptian figure's face, still with phallic symbol on forehead, vanished, leaving an empty void in which patient could see stars. The figure grew in size to something great and terrible. Patient knelt before the Egyptian as it continued to grow, eventually growing to the size of a mountain. Through the metaphoric vaginal opening where the face had been emerged a blood-red appendage, like a tongue or perhaps an octopus tentacle, writhing about. Patient claimed the experience was exhilarating and a kind of invitation rather than a threat. Asked patient about his father. Patient asserted that his father had been aloof, concerned with business and money matters, but was kind in a vague sort of way. Denied childhood traumas or bullying behavior from father. In recent years felt that I was a bit of a disappointment to my father, not demonstrating sufficient interest in family business and important things. Impression. Obvious sense of having failed father and not having achieved manhood. Sexual overtones of rampaging phallus palpable, not consciously sexualized by patient, but come on. Description. Continue to probe patient for traumatic event in which father exerted dominance, leaving patient with lingering sense of impotence and inadequacy. Asked patient to reflect on his mother for next week's session. Patient invited me to join him with some friends at the Cotton Club in Harlem. Might be a good marketing opportunity. His crowd are certainly ideal patients in many ways. Patient name, Carlyle R. Session date, 1/25/18. Patient seemed initially quite at ease after our lively night out in Harlem, but as I steered the session back to his mother, he became more reticent to speak. He reported having the Egyptian dream on Tuesday, but had a different dream on Wednesday. In this dream, he reported seeing his mother and father, dressed formally in the conservatory of their Westchester mansion. They seemed to be posing, as if for a picture, mother seated on an armchair, father standing behind. In front of the armchair were a series of confections, which his mother was eating. She ate more and more, until she started growing in size. Her body grew to where her dress ripped off her, as she kept cramming things in her mouth. As she became more and more obese, the candies became people running for their lives as she grabbed fistfuls of them and gobbled them up. His father became the Egyptian man and started stuffing these people into her mouth as she grew more and more huge. Finally, she ran out of the little people and turned to the Egyptian/father figure, ready to devour him. As she grabbed him, he vanished from within his clothes, and his face fell to the floor like some kind of mask. Mother wasn't Mother, she was a bloated monstrosity. Patient felt afraid he would come after him. Impressions. Definitely making progress entering the patient's unconscious mind, and a truer sense of the underlying relationship in the Carlyle household. Father was merely an illusion of his inner self. Mask? Mother, all-consuming. Hungry to eat him. Clearly a lot going on here. Prescription. Continue to pull dream imagery from patient to find source of emasculation in patient. Socializing with patient again may not be ideal for his treatment regimen, but he is proving to be an excellent source of new clients. IB has voiced a number of reservations about me spending time with him. She'll have to get used to it. The kid brings with me new referrals left and right. Session report. Patient name Carlyle R. Session date 2/1/18. Patient very relaxed now that we're spending quite a lot of time together in social settings. Patient continues to report powerful Egyptian dreams varying somewhat in nature. Some changes this week. Patient described a dream of a time of great political and social upheaval, a strange apprehension of hideous physical danger. The kind one experiences in the most terrible phantasms of the night, yet continued to assert dream was not a nightmare. Anyway, into this guilt-ridden landscape came out of the abysses between the stars, swept chill currents that made men shiver in dark and lonely places. Fascinating use of poetic language, not seen in previous recollection of dreams. Said sessions underwent demonic alteration, autumnal heat, and everyone felt that the world had passed from the control of known gods or forces to that of gods or forces which were unknown. I asked if these gods or forces had a name or face, to which he immediately replied they did, and the name was Nyarlathotep. The name was distinct but hard to catch. Seemed Egyptian again. Patient seemed pleasant to know the name of Egyptian dream figure. Beckoner. Father figure. Impression. Fascinating expression of the father figure, here described in abstract and poetical language. Why Egyptian? No references to mother figures here. Interesting scope of dreaming. Patient continues to be attached to an unusual magnitude or scale in imagery, God, space, universe, etc. I'm pleased with his progress in sharing intimate thoughts, but nature of paternal trauma still obscure. Prescription. Dream journaling seems to be effective as it is evoking new images from the unconscious mind. Expect great revelations. The medical board might have issues with me socializing so frequently with a patient, but they probably won't care. Certainly unlikely to complain, inasmuch as IB does. Session report. Patient name Carlyle R. Session date 2/8/18. Patient reported a dream in which he was a wild jungle man drinking from the edge of a mighty river. He witnessed a beautiful blonde woman on the opposite side who fell into the river. Unable to swim, she was going to drown, until patient as jungle man swooped across river, plucking her away from the crocodiles. The two swung from vine to vine, deep into the jungle. Finally they stopped, and the woman nearly swooned as she looked upon his physique. He carefully examined her torn garments and the delicate skin underneath. Coitus seemed imminent when he suddenly felt a horrible cold wind that smelled awful. He heard a sound, looked up, and saw rising over the jungle a giant monster with no head. Where the head should be, a bright red tentacle kind of thing waving about wildly. And he let out a loud wolf-like howl. When he looked back at the blonde, she had become Mrs. Kindle, his high school librarian. She sternly shushed him, and he awoke. Impressions. Obvious underlying issues here. Patient recently saw Tarzan of the Apes with Elmo Lincoln and Enid Markley. Miss Markley sexually aroused him, but his own feelings of sexual inadequacy, as represented by his aroused penis monster, inhibited him, returning him to a period of his life where he felt powerless, as in the school library. Prescription. What was it about Enid Markley that awakened this response? Phallic imagery tied to his need to be godlike. Carlyle R. Session date 2/15/18. Patient began, eager to share exciting dream. The Egyptian man came walking down Broadway and entered the Knickerbocker Theater. He went on stage where he had a collection of strange instruments of glass and metal, and then spoke of sciences, electricity and psychology, my kind of guy, and went on to perform a demonstration which sent his spectators away speechless, and brought him great fame. Figure had name from previous dream, Nyarlathotep. Should consult an Egyptologist and determine if name is real historical figure. Anyway, people from all over thronged to see these demonstrations, and those who saw it then had nightmares. Patient described the silence of a late night rent by the screams of those who had witnessed this Nyarlathotep. Impressions. Continue to associate this in persona as manifestation of patient's father, industrialist, powerful, bringing more change than joy to the world. Personally, I like the notion of God as a kind of showman, using tricks and modernity to create a veil in front of the utter emptiness of the cosmos, but that's just me. Prescription. Encouraged patient to attempt to engage with the Egyptian man in future dreams. Would like to see what such personal interaction looks like, how it is manifested. What will patient say to father figure? Session report. Patient name Carlyle R. Session date 2/22/18. More and more patient refers to Nyarlathotep as if it, was a real person whom he knew. I asked where this Egyptian came from, and he talked to me like I was some kind of moron for not knowing. Obviously, he came out of Egypt. No one knew who he was, but he was clearly of the old native blood and looked like a pharaoh. The fellahin, an Arab word for peasant, I had to look it up, knelt when they saw him, yet could not say why. Patient said he had risen up out of the blackness of 27 centuries, and that he had heard messages from places not on this planet. Patient reports that he finds he's less likely to be awakened by these dreams, and is sleeping better than he was prior to beginning treatment. Impressions. This Egypt thing really has me scratching my head. I have to keep probing to find some connection to Egypt in his youth, or through his father. Prescription. Patient heading to Bermuda for 3 weeks. Continue to encourage him to document his dreaming while traveling. Session report. Patient name Carlyle R. Session date 3/11/18. Patient returned from holiday to Bermuda, in which he described his dreams as vivid and fantastic. He continued to dream of the Egyptian as some kind of godlike showman. Told me the name is properly pronounced and written as Nyarlathotep. Not sure how he arrived at the spelling, but seems very confident about it. Patient said he had a friend whom he couldn't name, who urged him to see In's innermost mysteries, horrible and impressive beyond fevered imaginings. Images shown on a screen of a darkened room that none but this In could dare prophesy. In looked on sights which others could not see. Patient said he saw the world battling against blackness, against the waves of destruction from ultimate space, whirling, churning, struggling around the dimming, cooling sun. He said sparks played amazingly around the heads of the spectators, and hair stood up on end, whilst grotesque shadows came out and squatted on their heads. The show ended with the patient feeling a sense that In was deceiving audience with a showman's tricks. Impressions. Patient continues to grapple with paternal issues, yet underlying this Egyptian motif, there's a fascinating cosmic void, an emptiness which touches a deeper truth of the universe. I find myself ruminating quite a lot about the metaphoric power of this Egyptian In figure. Prescription. Continue to encourage patient to delve into his personal past. Current trajectory is interesting, as patient's dreams are inclined to the impersonal and cosmic rather than the personal/emotional. Decided not to tell IB about it. I've really had quite enough of her complaints. Session report. Patient name, Carlyle R. Session date 3/25/18. Patient again dreamed of attending a performance by the Egyptian in figure. This time, upon leaving the theater, seemed the city had been abandoned. Grass growing in the streets, tram tracks rusted, buildings falling apart. The audience members went in different directions, one group apparently being attacked in an alley, and another group entering a subway, from which they were heard to laugh madly. Patient's group walked toward open country, and felt a chill as they walked onto some kind of dark moor, which was covered with evil snows. Group wandered into a gulf with glittering walls. He lingered behind the group, and then heard a disquieting wail as they vanished. Patient felt beckoned by those who had gone ahead. Patient said, I half floated between the titanic snowdrifts, quivering and afraid, into the sightless vortex of the unimaginable. Continued use of exaggerated poetical language to describe dream imagery. Impression. The father figure was largely absent from this dream. Imagery suggestive of unfulfilled sexual desire. Other groups vanishing into subway openings and snowy gulfs. Patient claims to have a normal sexual relationship, and based on the eager young women who often join us in our various outings, I'm inclined to believe this is true. Probably some kind of disjointed attachment to his mother, exacerbated by her incapacitation. Prescription. Will continue to monitor patient for unveiling of emotional trauma from youth. Convinced paternal repression drives sense of inadequacy and desires for God complex. Patient seems happy enough. No reason to rush treatment. I want to tell Roger about the situation with IB. It would probably undermine his confidence and be bad for growing practice. Feel awful. Session report. Patient name, Carlyle R. Session date 4/18. Session date 4/8/18. Decided to experiment with a hypnotic session with patient today. Hypnotic state was easily induced, and once patient was relaxed, I asked him to tell me about his father. His response was bewildering. Screamingly sentient, dumbly delirious, only the gods that were can tell. A sickened, sensitive shadow writhing in hands that are not hands, and whirled blindly past ghastly midnights of rotting creation, corpses of dead worlds with sores that were cities, charnel winds that brush the pallid stars and make them flicker low. Beyond the worlds, vague ghosts of monstrous things, half-seen columns of unsanctified temples that rest on nameless rocks beneath space, and reach up to dizzying vacua above the spears of light and darkness. And through this revolting graveyard of the universe, the muffled, maddening beating of drums and thin, monotonous whine of blasphemous flutes from inconceivable, unlighted chambers beyond time. The detestable pounding and piping whereunto dance slowly, awkwardly, and absurdly the gigantic, tenebrous, ultimate gods, the blind, voiceless, mindless gargoyles, whose soul is Nyarlathotep. Impressions. Patient only tends to express himself in this literary manner when recalling dreams or in a hypnotic state. I should review Jung for more literature re patients who express themselves via objectified cosmic imagery rather than personalized internal imagery. There's something about this veneer over a cosmic emptiness which I find personally compelling. I don't know. After IB debacle, it's hard to feel like the universe adds up to much of anything at all. Prescription. Tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow. Patience, dreams, fantasies, obsessions repeat over and over again. Surrounded by madness, it's a wonder if I'm not mad myself. God, it all seems so meaningless. If IB's family find out, I'll probably get sued. Session report. Patient name, Carlyle R. Session date 4/15/18. Did another experiment with hypnotizing patient today. Once he entered the hypnotic state, he said, Nyarlathotep, the crawling chaos. I am the last. I will tell the Argent Void. Patient made no other utterance while in hypnotic state, and proved responsive to other forms of hypnotic suggestion. Impressions. Really at a loss here. Maybe it's because we spend so much time together that my hypnotic influence is diminished. What is a Nyarlathotep? Is it truly a god image of his father, or is it something else? Prescription. Thorough documentation of patients' dreams may no longer be needed. Roger's talking to me about them after our tennis games, and it's not unusual for me to interact with him in a non-clinical setting once or twice a week. Continues to be a good source of referrals to other patients. The rich all think they're mad. Session report. Patient name Carlyle R. Session date 4/21/18. Patient disinclined to talk about dreams this week, as he seems to have become infatuated with a young Negro woman this week. I met her briefly at Cub Hacha Saturday night. Don't really recall her well personally. It was late and I was pretty wasted. Striking looks, aloof, only interested in Roger. Perhaps has her eyes on the family fortune. In session, patient rambled on about her, claiming she was African royalty, a princess or priestess of Kikuku or some damned place. He feels she really understands him and believes that he is destined to do greater things than he can imagine. Impressions. Patient could have any eligible woman in USA. He chooses African priestess. Probably in defiance of his perception of his father's desires. Relationship with forbidden partner could be empowering for him. A step towards mastering his destiny for himself and not simply taking action to offend his deceased or incapacitated parents. Prescription. Encourage patient to follow his dreams and see where things go. He'll probably discover she's a gold digger and drop her once the thrill of being in a forbidden match burns out. Going yachting with a pair and other friends Sunday. Session report. Patient name Carlyle R. Session date 6/28/18. The African woman appears to have really sunk her teeth into Roger, and he's simply gaga about her. She doesn't seem to give a whit about society, and whatever may be proper under the circumstances. Roger really seems to thrive on the scandalous nature of his being seen with this swarthy woman. She doesn't seem to approve of my friendship with Roger, or the fact that I'm guiding him through a process of psychoanalytic self-discovery. Surely an African priestess doesn't understand a thing about the nuances of the mind and its fragility. Impressions. In talking with him after tennis, he did suggest that there's more to his infatuation. He claims that she understands him more deeply than any woman he's ever been with. Beyond his infatuation, he does seem less anxious than he has the entire time I've known him. Perhaps her influence may prove to be a valuable step towards his assuming the mantle of the family name and business. He may not end up as an Egyptian god, but perhaps he'll seize his birthright with some authority. Prescription. I shall endeavor to get more out of Roger about his interactions with this woman, and see just what buttons of his she seems to be pushing. Session report. Patient name Carlyle R. Session date 7/5/18. Attended the 4th of July festivities at Roger's place. Briarcliff is quite spectacular, and he certainly held nothing back in the festivity. Speaking of fireworks, though, Rogers opened up in today's session about his negress. She didn't speak to me at all at the party, but I'm not sure she ever let go of Roger's arms all night long. Her name is Merwu, or something like that. Apparently her tribe doesn't go in for surnames, or perhaps given names. Who knows with those people? Anyway, apparently Roger opened up to her about his in-dreams, and She's encouraging him to embrace his destiny and actually go to Egypt. Roger is a bit wary of such an undertaking, but it's clear that the idea entices him. Impressions. I still don't understand the significance of Egypt to Roger. It hasn't come up anywhere in his past that I can see. Perhaps it's tied to the grandeur of the pyramids, or somehow connected to the Egyptian obsession with the afterlife, a metaphoric mummification of his father so that he lives on. Prescription. Roger's actually genuinely interested in going to Egypt, and thinks it might be good for him. I'm divided on the issue. Embracing the reality of Egypt might get his unconscious mind to release this pattern of the in figure, goading him to seize his destiny. On the other hand, it may be traumatic for him to go to Egypt and discover he's no closer to resolving his paternal issues than he is in New York. Session report. Patient name, Carlyle R. Session date 7/12/18. Another strange turn in this saga. Apparently, Roger received a letter from an Egyptologist in London who is interested in mounting an expedition to Egypt. If Roger was to financially sponsor the dig, he would be able to not only just visit Egypt, but actually participate in some kind of archaeological dig there. It seems ridiculous, but Mayor Wu is fanning the flames of the idea. Impressions. How the hell did a British Egyptologist find him? Apart from being able to foot the bill, Roger's entirely unqualified for such an undertaking. Could his priestess have somehow set this up? I encourage Roger to look into the Egyptologist's qualifications to make sure he's legit. Prescription. There is a small spark of authority and initiative in Roger, which I see as a good thing. But I fear this may really be biting off more than he can chew. Roger was joking around, but said I should come with him, though his pal Jack Brady didn't seem to like the idea at all. I was thinking getting out of Dodge might be a good idea. The New York Medical Board is hardly likely to come looking for me in Cairo. Ha! Session report. Patient name Roger Carlyle. Session date 7/19/18. We've pretty much abandoned any formal psychoanalysis in Roger's treatments these days. I think he just likes coming to talk to me. His plan's getting stranger all the time. The Egyptologist, Sir Aubrey Pinhew, assures R that with his financial patronage, he can lead an expedition that could make remarkable discoveries about early dynastic Egypt. R believes it. No doubt because Mayor Wu is whispering in his ear. Was on R's yacht with this hotsy-totsy Hypatia somebody or other. Tells me she's going with R to Egypt. I'm thinking Mewaru may never go for that when R tells me it's true, and that his priestess approves. They're going forward with the plan. R is going, Mewaru, this girl, and Jack. He says they'll go to London first and meet the Egyptologist. Says he's serious about having me come along. He doesn't want to interrupt his treatments. As a psychologist, I think I'm allowed to say that this is crazy. Impressions. I do find I rather miss Roger's lengthy recapitulation of his dreams. The in figure is surely some archetype I have failed to recognize. Could it be it's not a representation of his father, but of God? Prescription. Egypt? Sure. Why not? What's the worst that could happen? Anything's better than if the press gets a hold of the IB story. Session report. Patient name Carlyle R. Session date 7/26/18. Last night I found that I had R's dream. The one about the in figure. It was the same kind of thing he described, except that he, Hypatia, and this old guy were there with me. We were in a tomb or pyramid or something, standing before this thin, swarthy pharaoh. He had that inverted ankh on his head like R described. It was as if we were making some kind of wonderful pact, which would have quite an impact on all of our futures. Impressions. Not really sure why or how I thought I could maintain objectivity where R is concerned. He's one of the few friends that I have left, and I spend more time with him and his crowd than I do with people in the medical circle. Still, I'm not sure I can continue to treat him when I'm the one having these dreams. Maybe I've been thinking. Maybe I've been drinking too much. Here I go, another session report that's all about me, 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 me. Prescription. Pay attention to patients. Maybe I should see one of my colleagues. Maybe I should throw in the towel and sign on to R's expedition before I end up in the clink. Session report. Patient name. Session date August 3rd, 1918. Sat R down today and suggested that perhaps I should no longer treat him. He took it very hard, weeping openly for quite some time. I tried to explain the ethical considerations, but he clearly took it as a kind of parental abandonment. Was very surprised when he told me that his African princess would be angry. Apparently she's become very attached to the notion of me being along their cast of characters. Tried to end on a positive note, but R just walked out. Defected. A necessary step, I think. Trying to effect treatment while having quite a lively social relationship is frowned on for good reason. I should know better. So this will be in the best interest and my own. Everyone can move on to a better place. Impressions. Prescription. Terminate treatment regimen for patient. Session report. Patient name Roger C. Session date September 8th, 1918. Saw R for the first time in, nearly 2 months now. He's fully on board with his expedition, and in fact he's calling it the Carlyle expedition. I will admit that his desire to go to Egypt seems to be emotionally constructive for him. His old neuroses have given way to a new kind of obsessive mania. The real question is what happens when he discovers that Egypt is just a sort of mask covering an underlying emptiness. What then? Seeing him again, I'm reminded my affection for him is quite genuine, as are my concerns as his doctor. I'm not sure he should be left in the hands of the lunatics and sycophants that he surrounds himself with. Imware, I learned how you're supposed to spell it in her language, is unimpressed by me, but thinks I should follow R about like some kind of doting toady. God knows he's got enough of them. Impressions. If I continue to treat R, it's clear that only Mweru or I can be his true confidant. I'm not sure I'll win this battle, but perhaps it's cowardice for me not to try and ensure this whole plan of his isn't a setup for a severe emotional collapse. Prescription. Should I try medicating him? I read a fascinating paper on the use of lithium to treat a variety of mental disorders. Session report. Patient name R. Carlyle. Session date. I probably shouldn't have documented any of this. No doubt someday it'll be evidence at my trial. R and I were at his place in the Hamptons. We'd had quite a lot to drink and she wasn't around. I suppose I was vulnerable, but I spilled the beans about IB to him. I mean all of it. Idiot. For some time he's been insistent about my coming with him, and Jack and Patty and her to England, and then on to Egypt. For the first time he told me he wasn't going to take no for an answer. Could he blackmail me? Part of me wants to throttle him, and part of me wants to crawl into his steamer trunk and be quietly loaded onto a white starship headed to England and ports beyond. It's clear a disaster is looming here, even without R's involvement. I's family is going to find out, and there goes my career. I could dress up my role in the Carlyle expedition as somehow being meaningful. Some of the motion picture stars have their own personal physicians. Why not R? It might make my work seem more personal, more exclusive. I've never been over there anyway. Pleased to say R can still be a lot of fun, and it seems that Patty always has some hooch or drugs to liven things up. Hopefully, the Brit won't prove to be insufferable. So here we go. Tromp around in the sand, find a few priceless baubles, and perhaps by then R won't feel so crushed by failing to rise to his father's expectations. And when he does, I'll be right here by his side, And we can start doing formal sessions again. I mean, what choice does he have? What choice do any of us have?